And so I have joining me this afternoon, actually a good friend, and I have friends all over this conference, but another good friend, Cherry Gregg, who's joining me this afternoon, who's going to lead our town hall discussion and really, share some of the points that were made earlier in the session, earlier in the day, and have an opportunity for us just to talk about them and ask questions. We still have some of the panelists left. We have individuals that led the breakout sessions that are here. And so, we really just want to engage in dialogue with everyone. And, at the latter part of this afternoon to see where we go. And then get your feedback on where we go and your thoughts and ideas, because a lot was thrown out. And we appreciate you sitting here listening. And now we want to get your thoughts and figure out what's on your mind. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Cherry. Cherry, thank you for being here this afternoon.
Thank you, Atif, for having me. I'm sorry I couldn't spend the morning with you all, but I hear that you had some powerful conversations and exchanges of information. Shout out to all the speakers from today. I see Kier there. I see Ruben. I understand Dorothy Johnson, Spite, Latrista Webb, all of you all were leading breakout sessions. And so I just wanted this is a safe space for us to kind of process all the things that you learned. I got a download and there was so much to take in. And so this is our opportunity as a group to kind of process some of the new ideas, reevaluate some of the things we thought we knew through a new lens, and just sort of bounce these topics off of each other. And so the way we're going to do this is because we reformat it so that now we can see each other and you can unmute yourself and we can talk back and forth. And so I want to throw out a first question because we want to talk about the issue of safety. All of us may feel a little bit different about what that means. And you can either use the chat, you can use your raising of the hand feature, but I wanted to kind of start it off by talking about what safety means to you. Some people, like to have police all around. Some people don't. Some people, safety means, having locks everywhere and an alarm system on their home. So I want to talk about this issue of safety, what you learned and how you feel about that. And when we talk about criminal justice reform and restorative justice, as we try to move our institutions to a more equitable system. And I'll throw it out there, and I'll call on some of my speakers who I know can help kick it off as we get the conversation flowing. But I want to hear from you on that topic. Did you learn anything new about what safety means?
I didn't learn anything in particular about what safety means, but when I think about safety, I think about being able to trust my neighbor and to seeing being able to walk downtown or whatever and having someone, no matter what they look like, race, ethnicity, etc., but knowing that we're going to look out for each other and we're not going to let any injustice happen right in front of us, for the plain point that we're human and we live in this congregation together. So we gotta maintain our environment.
Mm-hmm. So what does safety look like? I'll throw Kiera over there. You're looking very engaged, Kiera. When you think of, you worked in this system for so long. Just to give you guys some ideas and kind of get the conversation flowing, what does it look like for you? Or what do you think it should look like?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what it doesn't look like first. It's when I get plucked out of my community and put into a system where I am misunderstood, mischaracterized, and maybe unfairly processed. I don't feel safe. When I'm driving down the road and because of my color or complexion, I am pulled over and I am searched, I don't feel safe. And so when things like that stop based on just the mere fact that people can use bias assumptions and do things that make me seem disposable in my own community, until that happens, until that there are people that are not able to be politically used as pawns and people who are in charge don't do the politically expedient thing, but the right thing, I will not feel safe.
Anybody else? Right ahead.
Yeah. It's so funny as I was listening here today, and I lived in DC. I grew up in Trenton in New Jersey, and I'm spending some time in Hilton Head right now. and I don't see police around.
Mm.
And for me, safety is not seeing the police around. And I've traveled in post-conflict communities when I don't see soldiers around, when I don't see the need for anyone that needs to sort of assert authority about behavior. For me, that's what safety is, that I can move around. And I remember the other day I was driving here and I saw a police officer. I'm like, what is this? All of a sudden I felt unsafe. It's really quite extraordinary because in our communities, we're often told the police are there to keep us safe, and we feel the most unsafe in our bodies, in our presence, in our existence. And I think the idea that safety means the presence of authority, when so many of us experience that quite the opposite, which is why I think in Black communities we see police, and in sort of, non-community Black communities we don't see police. And it's globally the same phenomenon around what the police were created for in society, whether it's colonialism and it's how it's translated across societies, which communities are policed and which communities are not. And I think that speaks to the economics of those structures and how they reinforce themselves over time. So for me, safety is about not needing to see the presence of the police.
Yeah. And I got to point out, I remember going to school, like I went into a lot of schools reporting. And whenever I saw, I would see metal detectors, it made me nervous. Because when I went to school, we didn't have metal detectors. Why did we need it? And so just the fact that you need that in a school made me feel less safe. And we talk about, because if you think about, you go to the airport, you see the police, the TSA guards with guns. I feel less safe just by them being there. Anybody else want to comment? And we can switch topics as well if there was a thing you learned. Go right ahead.
I just want to jump in. I know John Raymond once, and if you don't mind, because I heard something here, a theme here, and I think what I'm hearing here is the cultural context of safety, right? And so when you think about that, right, how cultures experience safety is, I think, what's playing out here, right? And again, Rep Rabb said it earlier that safety to some is not safe to others. And I think one of the things that I would love to hear and comment on going down this path, and maybe it's one or two comments, so I don't want to, just kind of, stay here, but the thought around how do we close that gap, or how do we start to, remove some of the issues related to the cultural aspects of safety, right? Versus, how it plays out, I guess.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I saw Ruben, we have two hands up. Ruben Jones is one and Luis Perez. Ruben, we'll start with you.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the cultural aspect, because I think that, and I'm just going to speak personally, I move around a lot of different neighborhoods through the course of a day. And there's not times that I don't feel safe, because I'm in community with the folks that I'm serving. I'm in community with the folks that we're dialoguing with. I'm in a community with the people that we'll collaborate with. So it's not an issue about not feeling safe, right? And I think that that's the thing that we have to kind of reframe. People live in some of the worst neighborhoods, and I've seen people down in Kensington sleeping in a tent under a bridge where rats are running around, needles are around, all kinds of different things are happening. But it's not like they don't feel safe. I see people living in the projects and raising children in places that most people be like, it will give them pause, right? So I think that the reality is a lot of people do what they have to do in the moment they have to do it. What tends to not to feel safe is I'm in the car and I get pulled and I see those police sirens behind me pulling me over, because I don't know how this thing is going to turn out, right? I think I don't feel safe when I see elected officials who profess to represent a specific interest or concern of the people, and they introduce something or put something out there that's diametrically opposed to exactly what the people want or need. So those things I cringe at, because I know that they have a lot more power than that guy in the corner with the gun. Like, if he takes my life, he takes my life. I'm not even gonna know about it. I'm gonna be gone, right? But when somebody drafts a bill or creates some legislation that's gonna have a long-term impact on myself and my family, that's scary. And that's what I tend to not feel safe about, because our lives and community's well-being is in your hands, and it's not being cared for the way it should be.
Yeah, and I want to just Hassan Bennett put a point in the chat, safety is when each person and community understands the society they live, values their contribution. I think that's a point. It also seems like you're saying, Ruben, that safety comes with familiarity. If you feel familiar, if you feel that likeness and within your own neighborhoods and communities, it's like you feel much safer. Luis, I want to toss it to you, and then we'll go to John. Luis, you want to add something to the discussion?
Yes, how you doing all? I mean, this has been an incredible presentation all morning. I know I have a lot of our local individuals here as well. But I myself is what's called quote unquote returning citizen. My first time being ever exposed to police or handcuffs, I was 10 years old. My dad was an addict and of course used to sell drugs, and that became where he utilized myself and my siblings to be drug mules. And our first time being raided, and I was in handcuffs at 10 years old. And then, of course, that just escalated. My first time being into a fight at 14, I was arrested. By 16, defending my girlfriend again, was arrested, and I was considered a menace. So, at this time, it was just like downhill from there. I was on probation from the time that I was 16 till I was about 26. And it wasn't until that point in time where I was being violated for whereabouts unknown. And it was just my probation officer just looking for any reason. I was ended my probation. He said, "We don't need nothing from you. All right, take care." And 2 months later, I got a notice for whereabouts unknown for not signing my discharge paperwork. So at that point, I stood up for myself, and I came across a judge that just really impacted my life in such an incredible way. She looked at me for who I was at that moment, not my previous history, gave me an opportunity to fix that, and did not allow them to violate me. And from that point on, she opened up every door for me to work with the county. And now I'm working with our Criminal Justice Advisory Board. I hear all this that's going on, and I'm like, we're on the right track. We're building our community development. We're bringing in partners. I was able to open up my own business because I knew in my criminal history, I wasn't going to be able to work for anyone. So I got introduced to my community as a business owner. No one ever looked at me as a criminal or a returning citizen. Once I made that impact in my community, developed a relationship with state, county. I mean, we've been able to create bills for our local youth to change the system. I wasn't valued for who I was until I really explained who I was. And when I was shamelessly saying, "This is who I am," it was able to make such a different change because no one believed that of me. And it's there, it's a record. I'm not even trying to expunge it. It is who I am. Define me, and it's also defining us to make a difference now. So we just had a forum just last week with the School to Prison Pipeline that we presented with a local organization that we created, Lehigh Valley Justice Institute. With the Lehigh Valley Justice Institute, we're doing all that data analysis so we can present our case as we make the systemic change. So thank you for all this. This is inspiring.
Can we please put some clap emojis in the chat for Luis for taking control of your own life, redefining your narrative, and creating change in your own community. You are definitely an example I think a lot of people would be inspired by, including myself. So thank you for that. And I'm glad you've enjoyed today. John, would you like to comment as well, or anybody want to comment in response to that? That's amazing.
I mean, I agree with Mr. Perez on many, many levels. Me being 29 and actively on probation, and Mr. Tierney is my mentor, and we've actually went through, experienced multiple occasions where I was violated and sent to prison because of absconding or not having a valid address, or not being able to communicate with probation and me not being on the same level. And I think that safety is about being able to trust the Commonwealth and the police that are supposed to be there for you and be there to protect you, and not there to just, shoot you or objectify you and send you to prison. I think that there's a lot of work that could be done, and me and John agree that what happens in the jails is not just at all. If anything, they treat you like an animal, and the perspective in there is that you're guilty till proven innocent, almost in all cases. Mm-hmm. And it's a little unfair, but that's what life is like. And I've been able to persevere through multiple levels and multiple bumps of adversity with John Tierney, having him behind my back and him getting me proper legal representation, which has also helped me get out of the system. a lot of people you see when they do get in trouble, they then look for legal representation after getting in trouble and being incarcerated, which we know that being incarcerated is tough to fight from the inside. It's a lot easier doing it from the outside. And if you don't have the proper support systems, you just fail. You go dig deeper and deeper and deeper. We go to prison for violation of probation, and it's not even like we said. There's no new crimes, no new charges, but the fact that you may have met with your probation officer, and I believe Mr. Perez was saying, you may not have to visit with them, or everything's been summed up. You're good to go, but then you get a bench warrant or arrest warrant, and you go to jail, and you don't know why, and you sit there for a few months. And then you become institutionalized. When you come out, you see what happens inside, and it's not like regular civilization. You're deprived of all your constitutional rights almost. A lot of these CEOs are being overworked, so they treat the inmates like crap. And I've experienced it on multiple occasions. I'm a 6'7", 250-pound Black man. I played college Division I sports at Syracuse. I played football, and I have to be careful where I am, what I'm doing, who I'm with, and be very careful. I have to be very diligent with what I'm doing at all times, because there's always eyes on me. And John can attest for this, that the system is messed up. There's a lot of flaws in the judicial system. I used to live in Camden County with one of my teammates from Syracuse, and I know that they had got a new commissioner. They changed the entire police force. They were teaching those cops to not use their gun and use the taser. And it takes the trickle down effect from up top for things to actually change. And you need to see the foot soldiers, put it into effect, and so that our youth and everyone should be able to approach a police officer. And I live on Germantown Ave in Germantown, and they're not getting out of the car to talk to anybody. They're not doing anything with the youth. And I'm at 29 years old, and I still feel like I'm at risk. I have a son. He's mixed white and Black, and I always fear for his safety as well, because as an African American, we're always subject to pullovers and searches, and I think unconstitutionally, it's just messed up.
Yeah, thank you for that, John. I mean, I think you think about safety in the context of the body that you exist in, because as a 6'7" Black man, right? Some people see you and they feel unsafe, and so that in of itself compromises your safety. So, just and you couldn't choose that body. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is how you were born and this is how you exist. My nephew is 16 and he's 6'5", and he's a boy. And so people look at him and they see a grown man, but he's a boy and he might make boy mistakes. Kiera, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, but I want to let John go next, because
John.
I think the two of them go hand in hand.
Yes,
Well,
I didn't see that, John. Go right ahead.
No, that's but one of the things that has struck me, so that you all know, in the experience with John, I have spoken with the probation officers, a number of them. I have a nephew who is now finishing his first year or so on the Washington Metro Police Department, and assigned to sort of I think one of the most dangerous districts down there. I have another nephew who happens to be a probation officer in Bucks County, and I've taken the opportunity to talk to all of them about the system, if you will. There is not a single one who will not start with "it's broken."
Wow.
They sort of all recognize it, and the challenge being here today, working with you, is to educate, because if everybody thinks it's broken, all right, who do we get to fix it, and how? So that it was just a reflection on the fact that I am mostly in Montgomery County, in Bucks County, so I'm not really in the city, and I think that some of the dynamics are different, but the same. And I'm astounded by how many people who are sort of part of the system will all sort of say, yeah, it's broken.
Mm-hmm. And a quick follow-up question, because John talked about your excellent representation of him and how if he didn't have you, he would probably still be stuck. How hard, for the average person, you're a trained, practitioner, and you talk about trying to extract someone for the system. I want you just to kind of put it in contextualize. It's tough getting them out.
Well, and in fact, Sherry, I'm not a trained, I know you use that term, but the reality is John and I met, I don't know, John, 5 years ago, whatever it's been now, through a foundation who asked me to mentor a young man who was John to complete his education, and they would support it, with funds. And this was before the pandemic and all of that. And when we met, John, I hope you're okay with this. I think he was finishing up an ARD on some small marijuana charge, which obviously these days wouldn't even be a charge, but be that nonetheless.
Yeah, business.
Watching how that impacted him over these 5 years for any little thing that occurred. And if a probation officer or somebody, and so I happen to have a neighbor who has a small law firm. And when we did this, said, John, you can't wait on the public defender and all that. Let me talk to Greg. And he had a partner who worked with John, and trying to map it out, put it all on paper, make sure you don't wipe your nose the wrong way so that somebody can say, we're going to take you in. And I mean, one time he was incarcerated, and the judge said, oh, we'll let him go if you have a verifiable address. Well, he didn't have one. And so then as you're talking through, like, well, I'm sorry for the language. How the hell is he going to find one if he can't even, he can't
Get
do
out,
it while he's
yeah.
incarcerated. And none of this had anything to do with any sort of similar serious criminal activity. And you just project that. And then I also looked up some statistics. John grew up in foster care, but which was part of the attachment here. And the facts you've all put out here in this day about who's being incarcerated, it, from my other side of me as a citizen and a taxpayer and the investment of money, I'm an accountant by background, it's ridiculous where we're investing our dollars and our effort. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever to me. So Kira, I didn't mean to go on like that, but
No, you're good. You're good. We're sharing, and you said a lot of good things. And Sherry, you tell me whenever you're ready, because
John, did you want to comment back on what?
Yes, I wanted to say that the thing about safety reform and the youth and juveniles, you now see in Philadelphia that gun violence is just out of control, just like Baltimore and Detroit and other cities like that. And these kids are younger and younger. They're 12 and 13 years old with handguns in the streets, and they're shooting. Safety, that's their safety. They either join gangs or they get a gun, and now they're powerful. They can trigger and they can take a life. They can, they can protect themselves. They don't rely on the police. They don't, if there was a break-in and somebody got shot, the reaction, the police, by the time they get there, the criminal the criminal's gone. He's not even there. They're not catching the person. Now the person's fearing for their life. Now they go buy a gun. The gun's in the house. I mean, maybe it's not locked up and it's not safe. And maybe the kids are playing with the guns. The kids see the parents with the guns, or you got young parents too, parents that are 16, 15, 17 years old. And what are they to do if they can't trust the police, or they can't rely on, their local, like I said, Commonwealth to protect them? The Commonwealth, but the bad thing about being the Commonwealth state is that this probation is terrible. It's like a cycle. You get out, you get, absconding for changing your address and not telling someone, changing your job and not telling someone, you miss a meeting, or some of these guys that are doing drugs, they have a hot urine, and the probation officer says, oh, it's okay, we'll be all right, you can stay out. But then they arrest them, and now they're in, and they don't have a verifiable address. So it's a whole cluster of things that factor in to keep you in the system. And it feels like when you get out, they have no other option, and their mindset is to get back to selling drugs, get back to getting a gun in my hand, get back to the corner. But when you go to jail, the corner is not there for you. Those people that, provide the drugs, provide the guns, they don't support you in there. They're not calling you. They're not sending you letters. So you feel alone. You become institutionalized. Fine. It's a psyche thing. You get out and like, what are you to do? What do you know best? What are you good at? And when I was in there, I was telling kids, I'm like, listen, I played college football. I've played at the elite level. I've had opportunities that a lot of people haven't had. I've had some great experiences. I've had a second chance at life. I want you guys to be like me. I want you to get out and move away from Philadelphia. There's nothing here for you but crime. And they say, you know, if I don't get let out at this certain time, I'm gonna go right back to the streets and I'm gonna sell the drugs. I'm gonna get a gun. I'm gonna do what I did. You're gonna end up in the same exact place in front of the same judge, and they're gonna be like, why should I give this guy a chance?
Yeah. Thank you, John. Thank you. And I'm gonna jump over here because we only have a few more minutes before we wrap up. But thank you so much for that.
One comment
comment.
towards that statement.
Yeah, right ahead. Go right ahead.
I wanted to like mention that I believe that these young boys are really trying to express themselves, and due to a lack of opportunity to get involved in ways in which they can be highlighted and celebrated, are putting them in these small clusters that are influenced by very negative outliers. They're just influenced in wrong ways. So, you know, it's something that we all have to contribute. But I think that if these young boys were in environments where they can get involved, I don't want to repeat myself, in ways to be celebrated, awarded, and to gain that confidence that comes with being a young man going into manhood, I think we'll be way better off.
One of the interesting things they talked about with education is middle school. Those years when you go from 6th, 7th, 8th, those years are critical for young people. And it's almost like a deciding factor a lot of times on which direction, and people need to love on them in those critical years. Kier.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I was listening. Just
Lot to take in.
I know, right? So wait, I wanted to pick up on what John said about in how John Tierney and John Raymond, you guys are great, but how this conference has really come full circle to what he said. So one of the things he said, John was going to court and going into the system for really minor things, but he was being exaggerated and misnarrated as if he were a menace, right? And that allowed people to do what they wanted to do with him. Well, this is what the community has helped us deal with in Philadelphia. Number one, you can't just wait on your public defender to do everything for you. You've got to participate in your own defense. You've got to bring an army of people that understand you and that can force the people in that courtroom to see that your life matters and that you're not disposable. So that's one thing. And community has been pushing and advancing here in Philadelphia. And it's so sad that there's been getting no discussion on all the contributions that they've made for us to get a fairer system. But two, we've got to hold our system accountable. This justice system has yet to atone for all the damage and destruction that it has done to people's lives unnecessarily. Now, there are certain things that have to go through this system. Got it. You know, you're out there killing people. You're out there, you know, robbing people or committing sexual assaults on people. There's a process for that. But there are other things that are social in nature that people who go to school and have the experience and expertise to deal with that are better equipped to deal with it. And instead of allowing that opportunity or setting up those structures, we want to be paternalistic and maternalistic and say, I need to bring you through this system, brandish you with a lifetime conviction where the stakes are so high to diminish it diminishes your opportunity. And we do it without a bat of an eye. We disqualify people from entering into the job market and the labor market because we label them with convictions that they can't be a part of it. We don't allow for our next president to be, you know, fostered because we brandish them so easily with a criminal conviction. I want to see pushback on this system in making decisions. They need to be more thoughtful and more careful with our lives, and especially with the lives of our youth. So I just hope that leaving here, we feel empowered by all the community that has stood up and became a part of this process. And you know, you don't have to have a fancy title to do it. And so I'm just glad that Chestnut Hill College and Uplift Solutions has showcased this, because it needs to be spread farther and wider.
Yeah, and I want to just kind of, as we have about 10 more minutes for this discussion before we wrap up, but I want to throw another subject out to you guys, because, you know, there's been a lot of work. I've kind of covered the whole wave of criminal justice reform and how we have made a lot of progress in this area. But right now, and John touched on it, we see this spike in shootings and, numbers that we haven't seen since the 90s. And if we remember, the 90s was when mass incarceration blew up. I want to talk about, like, how do you guys feel when we talk about safety, when we talk about transforming justice, and we talk about this topic? How are people feeling about that as we try to balance this issue with also, pulling in and dealing with the issue of gun violence that a lot of the same people are challenged with? Yeah, and I see your name. I see Jay. Go right ahead, unmute.
Yeah. One other thing we touched on but not extended on today was the economic infrastructure that support gun violence. Like, these guns are not being produced in the community, right? So there is this kind of like economic infrastructure that support violence. And so how do we think about and consider the economic system, the market that exists in having more criminals, the market that exists to distribute those guns, and the community that are used as the customers? There's a certain design infrastructure that exists in our society. We touch upon it about the racial inequity, the historical inequity. What we have not sort of deepened our time in is like the very economics around the layers of the bail system, the court system, the officers, everyone that is involved, that must be paid, that must be employed to sustain the entire infrastructure that is reinforced over time. And it's not, it's almost kind of like, it's an industry, right? And it's sad to sort of say it, and I feel really uncomfortable having to say it, having to talk about justice from a framework of economics, right? And then we start to actually take stock on that. It pains me to understand it at that level. And that part of it, I don't know, and I'm not sure. And those who work in this space way more than I do outside the space that I do, how do we think about that? How do we bring this out? Because, it's one thing, these young boys now that are 12, 13, that are younger, our school system, from the technology, there's an entire economic infrastructure that sustains it. And what is there to be done around it? And I think what I've heard earlier about the community courts, the community system, is one of the most hopeful and optimistic framework that I've heard in a long time. In places like Rwanda, dealing with the genocide, have used court system to address bigger issues around the genocide. And so I think trying to come back to some of these kind of solution insight that's come out today could potentially give us a lens to think about how to unpack and unravel the entire economic system. Because without that, undoing the economic system, we will be here in other generation. We all understand here, the 13th Amendment, how we got here, right? And so that piece, I wanted to actually come back to it and come back to the community solutions that I was hearing about earlier. Thank you.
Thank you. And if anybody would like to comment on that, feel free. And I want to go to John.
Sherry, it as my buddy tells me every time we talk about any issues, the answer is usually follow the money.
That
And,
goes with what you
and
said.
John
Yeah.
and I have had this. I mean, he got incarcerated, and I got a phone call from a number that I don't know. And I tend not to answer my phone when I don't know a number, but ultimately I answer it, and it is a paid system for me to, accept a collect call from an inmate at this institution. And I'm thinking, like, I'm sorry, what the heck is this? Oh, by the way, I'm thinking after this happened, I'm thinking there are families, there are people out there, they don't have a credit card, perhaps even to put the numbers in to answer the phone. And so back to what Judith said, I mean, you've got an entire phone system and message system and money system that is owned, as I could track it back, best I could do, was like a private equity firm. You got a prison who's being operated not by the Commonwealth and that, but by a private prison operating company. And so there is, I guess I want to support what you just said. There is an economic infrastructure that is somewhat at risk, including with all the defunding of the police and all of that. I remember, I'm old enough now, yeah, I'm the old guy, to remember when the state, the Commonwealth and that shut down the mental institutions.
Yeah.
But then I don't know where all the money went that used to go there to train people to then help the people who need that help. And so I agree 100% with what Judith said. There's an economic infrastructure out there that needs to be and put back together again so that the funds are being invested to the benefit of, our society and the people who live here.
And I just want to point out that Bob Walden said the entire criminal justice system is driven by economic interests, jobs for prison staff and construction jobs in rural communities, private prison services, food, electronic security systems, and more. And I did a story not too long ago, a couple years ago, on the juvenile justice system. And it was a young man, kind of had a fight with his brother, ended up locked up and sent away to a facility in another county. And they kept extending it because they needed to keep a certain number, of beds filled. And so this kid ended up spending 18 months in this home where he couldn't leave, this juvenile home, for a fight with his brother. And, and there was an economic interest in keeping him out there and extending it because he's getting state money, or county money. So I just had to throw that in there. And I just did not understand how a fight with a brother could keep you in prison from 13 to you celebrating your 15th birthday there. You know what I mean? It just didn't make sense. John Denatif, John R. Denatif, yeah.
We all agree that the judicial system is flawed. There's so many loopholes. You see guys that commit murders and rapes and other, heinous crimes, they get off free. And the ones that are, committing petty crimes, misdemeanors and whatnot, they're getting sent to jail and, either they get into fights in jail or they stab someone or they're stealing or they have some kind of misconduct, which keeps them in there longer and they don't have a verified address, they have nowhere to live. Say, the PFAs have been bigger the past 5 or 10 than ever it has been. And, say a wife or a girlfriend has a PFA and they live together and they go back home. The man goes home just to get clothes, get him his belongings. He's paying the rent. He's on the lease. But the Commonwealth always sides with the child and the woman. And at that point, when you violate a PFA, you get a mandatory 6 months to a year incarceration. And so now that they're incarcerated, they don't have anyone. Say it's an older gentleman, most of his family's dead, not connected with anyone. He has no funds to make phone calls, no funds to get commissary. He's now confined into a box. He has nowhere to go. And now this person is, and what we were talking about, the defunding the police, that can only work to an extent. We need funding for a lot of these kids for after school programs. Funding the police, I feel like, is every police officer isn't bad.
Yeah.
Like few that tend to abuse their power, and those are the ones that we fear. And it's unfortunate that when they go through the academy or however they become a cop, you don't know what their intentions are. There's an agenda in some of these police departments, and if it's not for the Commonwealth of the community, then what is it for?
Yeah.
Who are you protecting? When we see a police car and we see a police on a horse or on a bike, we should feel like we can interact with them. We can go up and ask them a question and they can answer it for us, and we should be safe. When my last incarceration at Dauphin County Prison, there was a gentleman there that was from Philadelphia. He got carjacked at gunpoint and he had his own gun in the car, but he couldn't get to the gun to protect himself.
Yeah.
Got him out of the car, stole his car, drove off. He called the police. The police were asking him weird questions, and they showed up with like four squad cars. They found out he had a arrest warrant for something petty. He had found like an iPhone he wanted to sell off that was someone else's, and he ended up returning to the owner. Anyway, he ended up getting the arrest warrant for that. They arrested him and sent him to Dauphin County Prison after he just got carjacked at gunpoint. And so it's just
Yeah.
that, and he doesn't know when he's going to go before the judge. And if he doesn't have any communication on the outside, you're just stuck there. And I found out that this Harrisburg prison is way worse than Bucks County, way worse. It is just so far behind on technology, education, mental health, physical health. I unfortunately am a diabetic, and I have had my big toe amputated, and I just had my pinky toe amputated. And I was in Dauphin County Prison while I had my pinky toe still was on my foot, but I needed proper, podiatry care. They're not licensed to do that. They aren't certified to do that. So they do what they can, but it's not enough. And so while all of my healthcare went backwards. I take medication.
And John, I don't want to cut you off because I know you're dealing with a lot, but we literally have just a few minutes. But I think everything that John is saying here kind of underscores what we it's not safe. I mean, being incarcerated, being in the system is not safe. And we definitely need to fix this system. And the question is how, and we have less than 2 minutes in this before we have to close. So I want to give Atif and Latrista a chance to make the final comments.
Yeah, now I'll make comments at the end and close us out. So I'll actually defer to Latrista so we can get Latrista's comments in, and then after Latrista, I would invite Sister Kathy to make comments, and then mine are really, really short. So I'll invite Sister Kathy, and then I'll close us out.
I just had to make sure I wasn't muted. It just wouldn't be me if I didn't mention, because I keep hearing about our young boys and our young men, but we can't forget about our women, our young girls who commit crime, whether it's because they think it's cute, because they think the boy is cute, whatever reason they choose. And so they also need and deserve support. They also need and deserve programming. And we can't forget women who are being incarcerated at higher rates than ever before. So I just want to make sure that they are never left out of any conversation that I am a part of. So I heard a lot of talk about men and boys, and it doesn't seem as if there was any formerly incarcerated women or justice impacted women or if there were, they didn't get the opportunity to share their story. So I want to make sure that they're not left out. And then I guess it's a good sum up. I think that it's important when we talk about all of these things that we always have action items, right? So this conversation is great, and it's great to sit amongst people who do the work. But no offense, the people who do the work don't matter. The people who need the workers are the ones that matter. So that people get involved in community organizations that are out there really doing the work on the front line and putting themselves out there day after day. I always say there is no award or reward for this, but to know that you helped somebody, right? And so those organizations, the organizations that we heard from all day long, need the support of individuals like all of you. And that doesn't always have to be financial support, right? Other organization founders and leaders might not agree with me. That is great, right? That helps us to function and is important, but volunteering is important. Sharing information is important. We can get the clients, right? So not always you sending us people, but you being able to help us to manage those people. Those things are important, right? And those things create safe communities. When I can get a call and maybe I can't help the person, but I can be able to refer them to someone else who can. I can be able to send them somewhere else and know that they have the support to be able to help the people. Those are the things that create safe communities. But when I'm on an island doing it by myself, right, thinking that I'm helping, I'm not really helping to create safe communities. I'm creating chaotic communities. And so safety is found in numbers. Safety is found in support. And so I would hope that all of you that participated today would consider helping and supporting some organization. It doesn't have to be mine. I think mine is the best, but I'm sure Ruben thinks his is the best, right? And so with anybody else that was on this call today, right? But just supporting some organization, volunteering your time, and just helping us to be able to help our communities.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And thank you to everybody who participated today and who commented during this town hall with your and who took it all in and helped us all process this. I'd like to bring in Sister Kathy right now. I don't see you on my
Thanks.
screen.
Yeah, thanks, Cherry. This was great. And I think Latrina summed up anything that I might have wanted to say. So I simply want to say that I know I began this day with an audacious hope that when we talked about the investment of community in the transforming of our justice system, that we would find hope to move forward. And I know that the word for today is phenomenal. How many times did we hear that word? And so it was absolutely phenomenal. And my greatest desire is that in moving forward, even as we plan a next Transforming Justice Conference, that we will be building on what today offered us. It was such a learning opportunity to know the way community is invested in meeting each person as a human being with his or her own story. So to just reinforce what Judith said, narrative justice is just so important. And it can only happen at the local level when we know each person by name, that they're not a label that we put on them, and that we actually care about them as a brother and sister, as a person like us. So I just think there is so much for us to do. And as Latrista said, I hope that we will all get involved and find ways that we can participate as we move forward. So if anybody has information to share of, the many, many projects that are going on in communities that we can invite people to participate in, I hope that this will lead to action on the part of all of us. And I'm going to start right here at Chestnut Hill College. So we may be on the sidelines, but hopefully we're invested in making a difference for everyone on the front lines so that we can become one body working together. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sister Kathy. Thank you, Cherry, for your phenomenal work in leading this panel, and also your work in covering this, right? Because you're important and an important component in what's happening in the community, because you're sharing information, you're doing the research, and you're providing us what we need. So we really appreciate you and the work that you're doing. I'm not going to take long. A few things that I just want to just underscore really quickly. And, one of the big things was, again, what Sister Kathy talked about was the narrative justice and making sure that we're telling the right stories to ourselves and telling the right stories outwardly, making sure we involve those that we're telling the stories about, and making sure that we take an asset-based approach versus a deficit-based approach. The next thing that I just want to underscore, going back to kind of takeaways, is also paying attention to the structures and the things that we build ourselves and that others build, because not only are there the structures that exist, but we are constantly building and developing things ourselves. And we want to make sure that we're conscious that we're involving those that are impacted by what we do in our work. So making sure that we continue to engage everyone that's impacted. I was going to make one comment earlier, and John T. So this is John Tierney. I'll just mention this because we talked about, and it started with Judith talking about the economic structures of it all. And while we talked about the economics of the criminal justice system, I would also want to remind us that it's also the economics of capitalism. Because if you think about the impact of incarceration or just being charged with something, what it ultimately does, it actually suppresses and put downward pressure on the wages of those individuals that are impacted, right? So we have to think about that. And then you think about that downward pressure on those wages that actually supports corporations to be able to hire and manage their own P&Ls, right? Their profit and loss statement. So not only is it within the system, but it's also on the outside of the system. So we have to think about all of the levers as it relates to the economics of incarceration in the justice system as a whole. And then lastly, I think there were already calls to action as it relates to this, but get engaged, get involved, have conversations. I would love to talk to any and everyone about the work that we do at Uplift as it relates to engaging, the justice involved population, whether it's on a diversion, right, the no entry side or the re-entry side of it as well. So, I want to thank you for that. And then lastly, Sister Kathy, I'm gonna throw this out here as well, because you brought it up about sharing. I'm gonna ask my team, Torl and Noah, to send an email to the entire group to ask anyone and everyone for what they're doing, and then we could cascade it back out to everyone. So we want to make sure that we do that as well, that we're sharing that information. And then I think the last thing I will do in good form is I want to thank 3 individuals on the call. So we have our board chair, Sandy Brown from Uplift. We have our treasurer on the board, Sam Cates as well. And then lastly, I want to thank not only Sister Kathy, but Felicia Carazel, that's on the call, from the Nerney Family Foundation, for your commitment and support to this work. So I want to thank you guys for all that you do. We're excited. We're going to build upon this. And so Sister Kathy, Kier, I'm just kind of looking who has a camera on here, and all my other co-conspirators in this. Our work starts tomorrow for the next one. So I want to thank everyone. Thank you for all of this afternoon, and I look forward to seeing you again at the next conference. Take care.